Did dreams come from the gods? The belief in dreams in mythology. Opening the gateway between worlds. Close your eyes now and let yourself sink deeper into comfort. Tonight, we journey together through the mists of ancient sleep, back to a time when dreams were not merely the wanderings of a sleeping mind, but messages from realms beyond our own. For thousands of years, across countless civilizations, humanity believed that when we closed our eyes each night, we opened a gateway to the divine. Imagine, if you will, a world where every dream held meaning, where the images that danced behind your eyelids were not random firings of neurons, but carefully crafted visions sent by gods, spirits, and ancestors. A world where priests and priestesses devoted their entire lives to understanding the language of sleep, where kings and emperors would postpone battles and change the course of history based on what they saw in the darkness of night. This was the reality for most of human existence. And tonight, as you drift toward your own dreams, we will explore how our ancestors understood these mysterious nightly journeys and why they believed with absolute certainty that dreams came from the gods themselves. Let your breathing slow now. Let the weight of your body settle into the bed beneath you. And let us begin in the oldest place we know, where the first dreams were recorded, carved into clay tablets that have survived for over 4,000 years. Part 1. Mesopotamia and the Dreams of Kings. In the land between two rivers, where the Tigris and Euphrates flowed through golden plains, the ancient Mesopotamians developed one of humanity's first great civilizations. The Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians who lived in this fertile crescent did not merely believe that dreams were significant. They believed dreams were a primary method through which the gods communicated with mortals. Picture the great city of Uruk, rising from the desert plains around 3000 BCE. Its massive walls, built of mud brick, stretched for miles, encircling temples that touched the sky. In the cool darkness before dawn, a priest-king named Gilgamesh would awaken from troubling dreams, and the entire fate of his kingdom would shift based on their interpretation. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest surviving stories, is filled with prophetic dreams. In this ancient tale, Gilgamesh dreams of a meteor falling from the sky, an object he cannot lift, which all the people gather to admire. His mother, the goddess Ninsun, interprets this dream for him. The meteor, she explains, represents a companion who will come into his life, a man named Enkidu, who will become his closest friend and change his destiny forever. The dream comes true, exactly as predicted. This was not seen as coincidence by the ancient Mesopotamians. It was simply how the universe worked. The gods knew the future, and they shared glimpses of it with mortals through the medium of dreams. Let yourself relax even more deeply now, as we explore how these ancient peoples structured their entire understanding of dreams around divine communication. The Mesopotamians developed elaborate systems for dream interpretation, codifying their wisdom in tablets called dream books. These were not simple lists, but sophisticated texts that connected dream symbols to future events with remarkable specificity. If you dreamed of flying, it meant you would lose all you owned. If you dreamed of eating raw meat, it meant evil was coming. If you dreamed someone gave you a seal, it meant you would have a son. But the Mesopotamians understood something subtle about dreams. They recognized that not all dreams carried the same weight. They distinguished between several types of dreams, and this classification system reveals a sophisticated understanding of the human psyche. There were dreams sent by personal gods, protective deities assigned to each individual. These were usually positive dreams, offering guidance and reassurance. Then there were dreams sent by the great gods of the pantheon, Anu, Enlil, Ishtar, and the others who ruled over cosmic forces. These dreams concerned matters of state, warfare, and the fate of entire peoples. But there were also dreams sent by demons and evil spirits, the inhabitants of the underworld who sought to torment the living even in sleep. These nightmares were not merely frightening experiences to be endured. They were genuine spiritual attacks that required ritual protection and priestly intervention. In the quiet darkness of a Babylonian bedroom, around 1800 BCE, protective prayers would be whispered before sleep. Clay figurines of guardian spirits were placed at the four corners of the bed. Incense was burned to ward off demons. Sleep was not taken lightly. It was a dangerous journey into a realm where malevolent forces lurked. One of the most fascinating aspects of Mesopotamian dream belief was the practice of dream incubation. This was the deliberate seeking of divine dreams through ritual action. If someone faced a difficult decision, needed healing from an illness, or sought guidance about the future, they would go to a temple and perform specific ceremonies designed to induce a prophetic dream. The process was elaborate and required great preparation. The seeker would first purify themselves through ritual bathing and fasting. They would make offerings to the gods, burning incense and reciting carefully worded prayers. Then they would sleep within the temple itself, on special beds provided for this purpose, surrounded by the statues of deities and the sacred symbols of divine power. The priests who served in these temples were highly trained in the art of dream interpretation. They had studied the ancient dream texts, memorizing thousands of dream symbols and their meanings. When a person awakened from their temple dream, the priest would listen carefully to every detail, then consult the sacred tablets to determine what message the gods had sent. Imagine lying in such a temple on a warm Mesopotamian night, the air heavy with frankincense and myrrh. Outside, the city sleeps. Inside, you wait for the gods to speak. The stone floor is hard beneath your thin mat, but comfort is not the purpose. You are here to receive a vision, a glimpse of knowledge beyond human understanding. Your heart beats with anticipation and perhaps a little fear. What will the gods reveal? What future will they show you in the darkness behind your closed eyes? As you settle more deeply into your own bed now, feel how different our modern sleep is from theirs. We seek comfort, quiet darkness. They sought communion with the divine. Every night was potentially sacred. Every dream might change everything. The greatest dream recorded in Mesopotamian literature belongs to a king named Ashurbanipal, who ruled the Neo-Assyrian Empire around 650 BCE. In his dream, the goddess Ishtar appeared to him directly, promising victory in an upcoming battle. She was radiant, armed with bow and sword, and she spoke words of reassurance. "I will go before you," she told the sleeping king. "I will destroy your enemies." Ashurbanipal awoke convinced of divine favor. He told his soldiers about the dream, and their morale soared. They marched to battle believing that the goddess herself fought alongside them. And indeed, they won a great victory. The king had the dream recorded on clay tablets and stone monuments, preserving for eternity this moment of divine communication. But was it truly divine? Or did the king's own mind, processing his anxieties and hopes, create the vision of the goddess? The Mesopotamians would have found this question meaningless. For them, there was no distinction between psychological and spiritual reality. The gods could speak through the mind's own processes. The dream was real, regardless of its mechanism. This fundamental belief, that dreams connected the mortal world to the realm of the gods, would persist and evolve as civilizations rose and fell. And nowhere would it develop more sophisticated expression than in ancient Egypt, where dreams became entangled with the very concept of life after death. Part 2. Egypt and the Dreams of Eternity. Let your breathing slow even further now, and allow your mind to drift toward the Nile, that great river that made civilization possible in the midst of desert sands. In ancient Egypt, dreams took on layers of meaning that would have astonished even the Mesopotamians. The Egyptians believed that during sleep, a part of the soul called the Ba would temporarily leave the body and travel to other realms. This was not metaphor. They understood it as literal fact. When you closed your eyes and began to dream, your Ba spread its wings, for it was often depicted as a human-headed bird and flew beyond the boundaries of the physical world. Where did it go? To the realm of the gods, certainly. To the land of the dead where ancestors dwelled. To the future, to see events not yet unfolded. And sometimes to the primordial waters of chaos that existed before creation, where raw possibility swirled in infinite potential. Picture a chamber in an Egyptian palace, around 1250 BCE, during the reign of the great pharaoh Ramesses II. The room is cool despite the desert heat outside, its thick mud brick walls providing insulation. Linen curtains shift gently in the evening breeze. A lamp burns, casting flickering shadows on walls painted with protective hieroglyphs and images of gods. The pharaoh sleeps on a bed of ebony and gold, his head resting on a curved headrest of ivory. Around his bed, magic spells have been inscribed, and amulets hang from the bedposts to protect him during his nightly journey. For even the king of Egypt, considered a living god himself, was vulnerable during sleep, when his Ba left his body and traveled through dangerous realms. The Egyptians, like the Mesopotamians, developed elaborate dream books, but theirs reflected their unique worldview. One of these texts, dating to around 1350 BCE, has survived remarkably intact. It's written on a papyrus scroll now kept in the British Museum, and it offers us a window into how the Egyptians understood their nightly visions. The text begins with an important distinction. If a man sees himself in a dream, this simple phrase reveals something profound. The Egyptians recognized that dreams used symbolic language. The self you saw in a dream was not necessarily your physical self, but a representation of your fate, your destiny, your soul's journey. The dream book lists hundreds of scenarios, divided into good dreams and bad dreams. Each entry follows a formula. If a man sees himself in a dream doing X, it is good-bad. It means Y. Some of the interpretations are startling in their specificity. If a man sees himself in a dream looking out of a window, it is good. It means the hearing of his cry by his God. If he sees himself in a dream with his bed catching fire, it is bad. It means driving away his wife. If he sees himself in a dream burying an old man, it is good. It means flourishing. Notice how the interpretations don't always seem logical by our standards. Why would burying an old man mean flourishing? The connections made sense within Egyptian symbolic thinking, where death and renewal were intimately linked, where the cycles of nature, the flooding of the Nile, and the journey of the sun through the underworld each night created a worldview in which endings and beginnings were inseparable. But the most remarkable dreams in Egyptian belief were those experienced by the pharaohs themselves. As living gods, the pharaohs served as bridges between the human and divine worlds, and their dreams carried weight for the entire nation. One of the most famous prophetic dreams in Egyptian history occurred during the reign of Thutmose IV, around 1400 BCE. At this time, Thutmose was not yet pharaoh, but merely one of several royal princes, unlikely to inherit the throne. The story of what happened is recorded on a large granite stele that still stands between the paws of the Great Sphinx at Giza. According to this inscription, the young prince went hunting in the desert near the pyramids one day. The heat was intense, and at midday, he sought shade beside the Sphinx, which at that time was already ancient, buried up to its neck in sand accumulated over more than 1,000 years. As Thutmose rested in the Sphinx's shadow, he fell asleep, and in his sleep, the Sphinx spoke to him. But this was not the Sphinx as a mere statue. It was the god Re-Horakti, the sun god, whose image the Sphinx represented. The god complained to the sleeping prince about the sand that buried him, and promised that if Thutmose would clear away the sand and restore the monument, he would become pharaoh despite the unlikelihood of such a succession. Thutmose awakened from this dream and, believing it to be a true message from the god, organized a massive effort to excavate the Sphinx. And indeed, through circumstances the historical record does not fully explain, he did become pharaoh. Whether the dream predicted the future or motivated Thutmose to seize it through political maneuvering, we cannot know. But for the ancient Egyptians, the distinction was irrelevant. The god had spoken in sleep, and reality had conformed to the dream. Let yourself sink deeper now into your pillow, and imagine what it must have been like to live in a world where such things were not only possible but expected, where any dream might contain a message that would change your life, or even the life of a nation. The Egyptians also practiced dream incubation, but they developed it into something even more elaborate than the Mesopotamian version. Special temples, called sanatoriums or healing temples, were built specifically for the purpose of seeking prophetic dreams, particularly dreams of healing. The most famous of these was the Temple of Imhotep at Saqqara. Imhotep had been a historical figure, a vizier and architect who lived around 2650 BCE and designed the first pyramid. After his death, he was gradually deified and became known as a god of wisdom and healing. His temple became a place where the sick and troubled came to sleep, hoping that the god would appear in their dreams and either cure them directly or reveal the treatment they needed. The process of seeking such a dream was lengthy and demanding. Pilgrims would arrive at the temple and first undergo extensive purification rituals. They would bathe in sacred pools, abstain from certain foods, and participate in ceremonies led by the temple priests. They would make offerings and recite prayers, sometimes for days before being permitted to sleep within the temple's innermost sanctum. When the time came, they would lie down in special chambers, sometimes called incubation chambers, designed to facilitate divine dreams. These rooms were decorated with sacred texts and images of the healing God. Incense burned continuously. The priests would sometimes chant or play music to help induce the proper state of consciousness. And then, in the deep darkness of night, in a state between waking and sleeping induced by ritual, fasting, and prayer, the dreams would come. Sometimes gentle, sometimes terrifying, always vivid. Imhotep might appear in human form, offering medical advice, or the dreamer might see symbolic visions that required priestly interpretation. Some claimed to be healed the moment they awakened. Others received instructions for treatments involving herbs, diets, or further rituals. One papyrus text describes a man with a painful eye infection who spent 3 nights in such a temple. On the 3rd night, Imhotep appeared to him in a dream and told him to make a poultice from specific plants and apply it mixed with honey. The man did so upon waking, and his infection healed within days. The man dedicated a votive offering to the temple in gratitude, inscribed with the story of his healing dream. Were these cures purely psychosomatic, the result of belief and the placebo effect? Or did the priests, observing the dreamers, whisper suggestions while they slept, guiding their visions toward useful medical knowledge the temple possessed? Or were they, as the Egyptians believed, genuine interventions by divine powers who cared for human suffering? The question dissolves as you drift deeper into your own relaxation now. All healing has elements of body, mind, and spirit intertwined. The Egyptians understood this intuitively. They did not separate psychological from spiritual from physical. All were aspects of a unified reality, and dreams were a place where all three could be accessed and transformed. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, that famous collection of spells and instructions for navigating the afterlife, contains several passages related to dreams. One spell was designed to prevent nightmares, specifically nightmares of being forced to eat feces, which symbolized being made to do shameful things in the afterlife. The spell invokes the protection of the god Ra and declares that the dreamer is under divine protection. Another spell was meant to prevent the deceased from walking upside down in the underworld, a dream image that appears in several texts. The symbolism is clear. Walking upside down meant being in a state of confusion, unable to navigate the afterlife properly, perhaps doomed to wander lost forever. The spell reassures the deceased that they know the correct words and the correct path, that their dreams will guide them safely through the trials ahead. These spells reveal something poignant. The Egyptians believed that even in death, we continue to dream, that the afterlife itself might be experienced as a kind of eternal dreaming, and that our ability to navigate it successfully depended on our understanding of dream language and symbolism. As you lie in your bed now, breathing slowly and deeply, consider how different this is from our modern understanding. We think of death as the end of consciousness, the end of all experience. The Egyptians thought of it as a transition into a different kind of consciousness, one in which dreams and reality merged completely, where the Ba no longer returned to the body each morning but flew freely forever through spiritual realms. Their pyramids, those massive monuments that still stand after thousands of years, were not merely tombs. They were machines for transformation, designed to facilitate the pharaoh's journey from mortal dreaming to divine awakening. The texts carved on their inner walls, the prayers and spells, were maps for navigating dream reality. And perhaps, in a way we can barely understand, they were right. Perhaps consciousness does continue in some form, and perhaps the skills we develop in understanding our dreams in life serve us in whatever comes after. The Egyptians devoted thousands of years and incalculable resources to this belief. They were not fools. They were grappling with the deepest mysteries of existence, using the tool of dreams as their primary method of investigation. But we must journey onward now, following the path of dream belief as it spread from Egypt to the islands and mainland of ancient Greece, where it would encounter a new kind of thinking, and where the tension between divine inspiration and human reason would begin to reshape how dreams were understood. Part 3. Greece and the birth of interpretation. Let your mind drift now across the Mediterranean Sea, gliding over azure waters toward the rocky shores of Greece. Here, beginning around 800 BCE, a new civilization was forming, one that would eventually give birth to philosophy, democracy, and scientific thinking. But the ancient Greeks did not begin as rationalists. They began, like all peoples, as dreamers who believed the gods spoke through sleep. Picture the island of Delos, sacred birthplace of Apollo, god of prophecy, music, and light. On this small, rocky island, a sanctuary to Apollo attracted pilgrims from across the Greek world, and near his temple stood a shrine where people came specifically to seek prophetic dreams. The Greeks inherited much of their dream belief from the cultures that preceded them, from the Mycenaeans, who themselves had been influenced by Egyptian and Near Eastern ideas, from the Minoans of Crete, whose mysterious civilization left behind no written language we can read, but whose art suggests rich, religious, and symbolic life. All of these threads wove together into Greek dream culture. In Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, composed around 750 BCE, but describing events centuries earlier, dreams play crucial roles in the narrative. The most famous dream in the Iliad is false, deliberately sent by Zeus to deceive King Agamemnon. Zeus wants to honor Achilles, who has withdrawn from battle, by letting the Trojans win victories. So he sends a deceptive dream to Agamemnon, promising him victory if he attacks immediately. The dream takes the form of Nestor, an older advisor whom Agamemnon trusts. Dream Nestor speaks with Nestor's voice and manner, and delivers Zeus's false message convincingly. Agamemnon awakens and, believing the dream, orders an attack that leads to disaster. This story reveals something sophisticated in Greek dream thinking. Unlike the Mesopotamians and Egyptians, who generally believed all dreams from the gods were true, the Greeks recognized that dreams could deceive, that even divine dreams might be deliberately false, sent by gods pursuing their own agendas. This introduced an element of uncertainty. How could you tell a true dream from a false one? How could you know whether to trust what you saw in sleep? Homer provides a poetic answer. In the Odyssey, Penelope, waiting for her husband's return, tells a stranger, who is actually Odysseus in disguise, about a dream she had. But before describing it, she explains that there are two gates through which dreams come to humanity. One is made of horn, and dreams that pass through it are true. The other is made of ivory, and dreams that pass through it are false, deceptive, filled with empty promises. But Penelope has no way of knowing which gate her own dream came through. This is the human condition in the Homeric world. We receive dreams, some true and some false, and we must use our judgment, our wisdom, our understanding of the gods' natures to determine which to trust. As you relax even more deeply now, notice how this reflects our own experience with dreams. Some seem meaningful, pregnant with significance. Others seem obviously random, fragments of daily life reassembled chaotically. Yet we cannot always tell, in the moment of dreaming or even upon waking, which is which. The Greeks developed their own practice of dream incubation, but they elevated it to become one of their most important religious practices. Temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, became centers where hundreds of thousands of sick people came to seek healing dreams over the centuries. The largest and most famous of these was at Epidaurus, in the Peloponnese. The ruins still stand today, including a magnificent theater. But in ancient times, the heart of the sanctuary was the Abaton, the sleeping hall where pilgrims spent the night hopping for a visit from Asclepius in their dreams. The process at Epidaurus was similar to the Egyptian incubation temples, but with distinctly Greek characteristics. Pilgrims would arrive and first make sacrifices to the god, usually roosters or goats. They would bathe in sacred springs to purify themselves. Then they would participate in theatrical performances, as drama was believed to have therapeutic and spiritually preparatory effects. On the evening they were to sleep in the Abaton, they would feast on the meat of the animals they had sacrificed, creating a sense of communion with the god through shared food. As night fell, they would process to the sleeping hall, chanting hymns to Asclepius. The Abaton itself was a long stone building with rows of beds. The atmosphere was carefully controlled. Dim lighting, incense, the sound of water from nearby springs. Priests moved among the pilgrims, reciting prayers and perhaps administering mild sedatives or substances believed to enhance dreaming. And then sleep. In that liminal space between waking and dreaming, many reported that Asclepius appeared to them, sometimes as a bearded man accompanied by a sacred dog or serpent, sometimes as a serpent himself, slithering among the sleeping pilgrims and licking their wounds, sometimes as a beam of light or a feeling of warmth and healing spreading through the body. Hundreds of stone tablets have been found at Epidaurus, inscribed by grateful pilgrims describing their healing dreams. One tells of a man who had been blind for 5 years. Asclepius appeared in his dream and restored his sight by anointing his eyes. When he awoke, he could see. Another describes a woman who had been unable to conceive. The god appeared and touched her belly, and within a year, she bore a healthy child. How much of this was suggestion, faith healing, psychosomatic cure? How much was priestly intervention, doctors working under cover of religion? And how much was something else, something we might call the power of symbols and archetypes working in the depths of the unconscious mind? The Greeks did not ask these questions. For them, the division between psychology and spirituality did not exist. Healing was healing, whatever its mechanism, and if it came through dreams, those dreams were gifts from the god. But something new was beginning to happen in Greece, something that would eventually transform how dreams were understood. Philosophers were starting to ask different kinds of questions. Around 350 BCE, Aristotle, student of Plato and tutor to Alexander the Great, wrote a short treatise called On Dreams. In it, he does something revolutionary. He attempts to explain dreams without reference to the gods. Aristotle proposes that dreams are the result of sensory impressions that persist in the mind after we fall asleep. During the day, our senses are constantly bombarded with new information, and this overwhelming flow of data drowns out the faint traces of previous sensations. But at night, when external stimuli decrease, these residual impressions bubble up into consciousness, combining and recombining in ways that seem strange because they follow the mind's own logic rather than the logic of the external world. He gives examples. If you've been looking at the sun or a bright fire and then you close your eyes, you continue to see afterimages of that light. Similarly, strong sensations or emotions from waking life create impressions that persist into sleep and shape your dreams. A soldier who has experienced battle will dream of warfare. A person in love will dream of their beloved. Aristotle doesn't deny that dreams might sometimes predict the future, but he offers a naturalistic explanation. Dreams might predict the future because they reveal the early stages of physiological processes we haven't yet consciously noticed. For example, if you're getting sick, you might dream of something related to illness before you consciously feel unwell, because your body has already begun to sense the disease. This is remarkable thinking for its time. Aristotle is proposing that dreams come from within us, from natural processes, rather than from external divine forces. He's beginning to psychologize dreams, to see them as products of the human mind rather than messages from beyond. But notice that even Aristotle doesn't go all the way. He still leaves room for prophetic dreams, even if he tries to explain them naturalistically. And most importantly, his philosophical approach to dreams remained a minority view. Most Greeks continued to believe that meaningful dreams came from the gods, and they continued to practice dream incubation and consult dream interpreters. In fact, dream interpretation became a profession in Greece. Professional oneirocrits, dream interpreters, set up shops in marketplaces and offered their services for a fee. They had memorized vast catalogs of dream symbols and their meanings, much like the Egyptian and Mesopotamian dream books, but with distinctly Greek content. The most famous dream interpreter of antiquity was Artemidorus, who lived in the 2nd century CE, well into the Roman period, but who drew on centuries of Greek tradition. He wrote a massive work called the Critica, which survives intact and gives us the most complete picture we have of how ancient Mediterranean peoples understood dreams. Artemidorus traveled throughout Greece and Asia Minor, collecting dreams and their interpretations from anyone who would share them. He interviewed people from all walks of life: merchants, slaves, soldiers, priests, prostitutes, farmers, gathering thousands of dreams and carefully noting what happened afterward to determine if the dreams had been prophetic. His method was empirical in a pre-scientific sense. He was trying to discover patterns, to determine which dream symbols consistently predicted which outcomes. This was not divine revelation he sought, but observable regularity. In this way, he was heir to Aristotle's naturalistic approach, even though he fully believed that some dreams were sent by the gods. Artemidorus made several crucial distinctions. First, he divided dreams into two main categories: enhypnia, ordinary dreams that reflected daily concerns and had no prophetic significance, and oneiroi, meaningful dreams that predicted the future or contained divine messages. How could you tell them apart? Enhypnia usually involved recent events, familiar places, and mundane concerns. They were the mind processing daily experience. Oneiroi had a different quality. They were vivid, memorable, often involved unfamiliar scenes or symbolic imagery, and they felt significant upon waking. But Artemidorus went further. He recognized that dream symbols meant different things for different people, depending on their circumstances, occupation, and personality. For example, dreaming of a crown meant good fortune for most people, but for a criminal, it meant being caught and punished, because criminals were often crowned with thorns in mockery before execution. This was sophisticated thinking. Artemidorus understood that dreams used personal symbolism, that their meaning depended on context. He was groping toward what we might call a psychological understanding of dreams, even though he still worked within a framework that accepted divine communication. Let your breathing deepen now, and feel how your own dreams draw on your personal experiences, your fears and hopes, your daily concerns. The ancients knew this. They understood that even if the gods spoke through dreams, they spoke in a language shaped by individual human minds. Part 4. Rome and the Pragmatic Dream. As you drift deeper into relaxation, let us move forward in time to the rise of Rome, that practical, administrative empire that would eventually rule the entire Mediterranean world and much of Europe besides. The Romans inherited Greek culture wholesale, including Greek beliefs about dreams, but they filtered everything through their pragmatic, results-oriented worldview. The Romans were not philosophical dreamers. They were soldiers, farmers, administrators, engineers. They wanted to know what dreams meant in terms of action. Should I fight this battle? Should I invest in this business? Should I marry this person? Dreams that answered such questions were valuable. Dreams that didn't were wastes of time. Picture a Roman villa in the countryside outside Rome around 50 BCE. The late afternoon sun slants through the columns of the peristyle, casting long shadows across the mosaic floor. In his study, a wealthy merchant named Lucius paces nervously. He has been offered a business opportunity, a chance to invest in a large shipment of wine from Greece. The potential profit is enormous, but so is the risk. Pirates prowl the sea lanes. Storms can destroy ships. And the political situation is unstable. Civil war threatens. Lucius has consulted his dreams. Last night, he dreamed of his deceased father, who appeared to him and spoke a single word: navigate. The merchant is unsure what this means. Is his father encouraging him to take the risk, to navigate the dangerous business waters, or warning him about the literal dangers of sea navigation? He decides to consult a professional dream interpreter, one of many who practice in Rome. The interpreter listens carefully to the dream's details, asks about Lucius's relationship with his father, inquires about the merchant's recent concerns. Then he delivers his interpretation. The dream is favorable. The father's spirit is watching over him, and the word navigate is an encouragement. But the interpreter also warns that the dream suggests personal attention will be necessary. Lucius should not simply invest and hope for the best. He should perhaps travel with the shipment himself or carefully choose a captain he trusts. Lucius decides to invest. The ship makes the journey successfully and he profits handsomely. Was it the dream that led to this success, or simply the merchant's good judgment in selecting a venture and managing it carefully? For Lucius, there is no distinction. The dream was part of his decision-making process, a tool like any other. The Romans treated dreams pragmatically, but they also took them seriously at the highest levels of government. Julius Caesar reportedly had a disturbing dream the night before he crossed the Rubicon River with his army in 49 BCE, an act that would plunge Rome into civil war. In the dream, he had an incestuous encounter with his mother. Horrified, he consulted dream interpreters who told him that his mother represented Rome itself, and the dream meant he would possess supreme power over the city. Whether this dream actually happened or was invented later to add drama to the story, we cannot know. But the fact that Roman historians included it in their account shows how seriously Romans took prophetic dreams, especially dreams of their leaders. The Emperor Augustus, who ruled from 27 BCE to 14 CE, believed so strongly in the power of dreams that he issued a law requiring any citizen who had a dream concerning the state to proclaim it in the marketplace. He wanted to know what messages the gods were sending about Rome's future, even if those messages came through the dreams of common people. Augustus himself experienced several prophetic dreams, according to his biographer Suetonius. Before the Battle of Philippi, where he and Mark Antony would face Caesar's assassins, Augustus was sick and planning to remain in camp. But a friend dreamed that Augustus would be killed if he stayed in his tent. Augustus therefore went to the battlefield despite his illness, and indeed, his tent was overrun and destroyed by enemy forces. The dream had saved his life. The Roman statesman Cicero, who lived from 106 to 43 BCE, represents an interesting middle ground in Roman thinking about dreams. A highly educated man, versed in Greek philosophy, Cicero was skeptical of many religious claims. In his philosophical writings, he questions whether the gods really communicate through dreams. His argument is logical and pointed. If the gods want to communicate with us, why do they do so in such an unclear, symbolic manner? Why not appear to us while we're awake and speak plainly? Why use symbolism that requires professional interpreters to understand? And why do dreams so often fail to come true? Cicero notes that people remember the dreams that seem prophetic and forget the many dreams that were meaningless or false. This creates an illusion of accuracy. If you have 1,000 dreams in a lifetime, and 10 of them happen to coincidentally align with future events, you'll remember those 10 and forget the 990 that didn't. This seems to predict the future, but it's actually just probability. These are devastating criticisms, and they anticipate modern skeptical thinking about prophetic dreams by nearly 2,000 years. Yet even Cicero admits that some dreams do seem genuinely prophetic, and he cannot fully explain them away. He ends his discussion of dreams with uncertainty, unable to completely dismiss or completely accept the idea of divine dreams. Let yourself sink deeper now, and notice how this Roman tension between skepticism and belief mirrors our own modern relationship with dreams. We know, scientifically, that dreams are produced by our brains, yet we cannot shake the feeling that some dreams mean something, that they reveal truths we need to know. The Roman period also saw the continued popularity of dream incubation at healing temples, now dedicated not only to the Greek Asclepius, but also to his Roman equivalent, Aesculapius. The Temple of Aesculapius on Tiber Island in Rome became a major healing center, and people traveled from across the empire to sleep there and seek healing dreams. The process remained similar to the Greek practice: purification, sacrifice, ritual sleep in a sacred space. But the Romans, ever practical, also employed doctors at these temples. The line between religious healing through dreams and medical treatment through physicians became blurred. Did the god heal through the dream, or did the dream convince the patient to follow the physician's advice? Either way, people were healed, and that was what mattered. One particularly fascinating Roman dream practice was the tradition of dream telling at breakfast. In wealthy households, family members and friends would gather in the early morning and share their dreams from the night before. This was social entertainment, but also serious business. Dreams might reveal threats, opportunities, divine favor, or displeasure. A Roman named Pliny the Younger describes in his letters how his uncle, Pliny the Elder, would wake early and immediately tell his household any significant dreams. Scribes would be summoned to record them. This created a dream archive, a personal record that could be consulted later to determine if the dreams had been prophetic. This practice of dream journals, of recording dreams to analyze them later, represents a crucial development in human relationship with dreams. It shows a move toward seeing dreams as data, as information that can be collected, compared, and analyzed. It's a step toward psychology, even if the Romans themselves still believed they were studying divine messages. The most detailed account of dream interpretation from the Roman period is, as mentioned earlier, Artemidorus's Wonera Critica. Though Artemidorus was Greek, he wrote during the Roman Empire, and his work was widely read by Romans. His massive catalog of dream symbols and their interpretations gives us an invaluable window into how ancient people understood dream symbolism. Some of his interpretations seem strange to us now. To dream of eating human flesh means you will become wealthy by eating up your inheritance. To dream of losing your teeth means losing members of your household. To dream of being beheaded means being freed from worries, because the head is where worries reside. But some of his insights are remarkably psychological. He notes that dreams of flying often occur when the dreamer has ambitions for advancement in social status. Dreams of being naked in public reflect anxiety about exposure and shame. Dreams of searching for something and being unable to find it suggest the dreamer is frustrated in their waking goals. Artemidorus also discusses sexual dreams with remarkable frankness and sophistication. He recognizes that such dreams often have symbolic rather than literal meaning. A man dreaming of intercourse with his mother might be anxious about his mother's health or about his relationship with his motherland, or about any nurturing relationship in his life. Context determines meaning. As you rest now, breathing slowly and deeply, consider how far we've come in this journey through ancient dream beliefs. From the Mesopotamians who saw dreams as straightforward messages from gods, through the Egyptians who saw them as soul journeys, to the Greeks who began to question and analyze, and finally to the Romans who pragmatically recorded and cataloged, but never quite lost their sense that dreams connected them to something beyond the everyday world. But we must move forward now, into a new era, when a different religious tradition would transform how the Western world understood dreams. Part 5. The Biblical Dreamers. Let your mind drift now into the ancient Near East, to the lands where Judaism emerged and where, eventually, Christianity would be born. In the Bible, dreams play a crucial and fascinating role, serving as one of the primary means by which God communicates with humanity. Picture a dark night in Canaan, around 1800 BCE according to biblical chronology. An old man named Abraham sleeps beneath the stars, far from any city. He has been called by God to leave his homeland and travel to a new land that God will show him. But Abraham is troubled. God has promised him descendants as numerous as the stars, yet he and his wife Sarah are elderly and childless. How can this promise possibly come true? In the depth of sleep, God speaks to Abraham in a vision, reassuring him that the promise will be fulfilled, that his descendants will be as uncountable as the stars above. But God also reveals something troubling. Those descendants will spend 400 years in slavery in a foreign land before they can claim the promised territory. This dream vision is presented as absolutely true, unquestionably from God. There is no doubt, no interpretation needed. God speaks clearly in the dream, and Abraham believes. This will be a pattern throughout the Hebrew Bible. God uses dreams to communicate directly with chosen individuals, and those dreams are always true, always significant. But there's an important distinction in biblical dream theology. Not everyone receives dreams from God. True prophetic dreams are gifts given to specific people for specific purposes. The ability to receive and understand divine dreams is a sign of being chosen, of being in right relationship with God. The most famous dreamer in the Hebrew Bible is Joseph, son of Jacob. Joseph's story, told in the book of Genesis, is essentially a story about dreams and their power to shape destiny. As a young man, Joseph has two dreams that he foolishly shares with his brothers. In the first dream, he and his brothers are binding sheaves of grain in the field, and Joseph's sheaf stands upright while his brothers' sheaves bow down to it. In the second dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bow down to Joseph. The meaning seems clear. Joseph will one day rule over his family. His brothers, already jealous of their father's favoritism toward Joseph, become enraged. They plot to kill him, but instead sell him into slavery in Egypt. Joseph's dreams seem to have brought about his downfall rather than his elevation. But let yourself relax deeply now and follow Joseph's journey as years pass. In Egypt, serving in the household of a powerful man named Potiphar, Joseph prospers through his abilities, but he is falsely accused of assault and thrown into prison. There, he meets two servants of Pharaoh, a cupbearer and a baker, both imprisoned for offending their master. One morning, Joseph notices that both men are troubled. They've each had vivid dreams the night before, and they're disturbed because they have no one to interpret their dreams. In Egypt, dream interpretation was a professional skill, and these prisoners have no access to an interpreter. Joseph, inspired by his faith in God, offers to interpret their dreams. The cupbearer dreamed of a vine with 3 branches that budded, blossomed, and produced grapes, which he pressed into Pharaoh's cup. Joseph interprets this. In 3 days, Pharaoh will restore the cupbearer to his position. The baker, encouraged by this positive interpretation, shares his dream. He dreamed of 3 baskets of bread on his head, and birds were eating from the top basket. Joseph's interpretation is grim. In 3 days, Pharaoh will execute the baker. Both interpretations come exactly true. Joseph asks the cupbearer to remember him and speak to Pharaoh on his behalf, but the cupbearer forgets Joseph for 2 more years. Then Pharaoh himself has troubling dreams. In the first, 7 fat cows emerge from the Nile, followed by 7 thin cows who eat the fat cows but remain thin. In the second dream, 7 healthy ears of grain are devoured by 7 withered ears. Pharaoh awakens disturbed and calls for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt to interpret these dreams, but none can satisfy him. Finally, the cupbearer remembers Joseph and tells Pharaoh about the Hebrew slave who correctly interpreted dreams in prison. Joseph is brought before Pharaoh, and he interprets both dreams as having the same meaning. 7 years of abundant harvest will be followed by 7 years of devastating famine. Joseph advises Pharaoh to appoint someone to oversee storing grain during the abundant years to prepare for the famine. Pharaoh is so impressed that he appoints Joseph himself to this position, making him second only to Pharaoh in power over Egypt. And thus Joseph's youthful dreams come true. His family eventually comes to Egypt seeking food during the famine, and they bow before him, not recognizing the brother they sold into slavery years before. This is one of the most sophisticated dream narratives in ancient literature. Notice the multiple layers: Joseph's own dreams that predict his future, his ability to interpret others' dreams as a gift from God, and the crucial role dreams play in moving the entire narrative forward. Without dreams, Joseph remains a slave, and the Israelites never come to Egypt, and the entire story of the Exodus, the central narrative of Jewish identity, never happens. The Joseph story also reveals an interesting biblical perspective on dreams versus human wisdom. The Egyptian magicians and wise men cannot interpret Pharaoh's dreams, despite their training and their dream books. But Joseph, empowered by God, can. This suggests that true dream interpretation comes not from memorized symbol systems, but from divine inspiration, from a direct connection to the source of the dreams themselves. As you breathe slowly and deeply now, let yourself appreciate the psychological sophistication in this ancient story. Joseph's character development, from arrogant youth to humble prisoner to wise administrator, is reflected in his changing relationship with dreams. His early dreams inflate his ego. His interpretations in prison show emerging compassion and skill. His interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams demonstrates mature wisdom in service of others. Dreams appear throughout the rest of the Hebrew Bible, always as vehicles for divine communication. Jacob, Joseph's father, dreams of a ladder reaching from earth to heaven with angels ascending and descending on it, and God speaks to him from the top of the ladder, confirming the covenant made with Abraham. Solomon, the wise king, receives from God the gift of wisdom in a dream, after God asks him what he desires most. The prophets frequently receive their visions in dreamlike states. The prophet Daniel, serving in the Babylonian court centuries after Joseph served in Egypt, also becomes famous as an interpreter of dreams. When King Nebuchadnezzar has a troubling dream and demands that his wise men not only interpret it, but first tell him what he dreamed, to test whether they're truly wise, only Daniel, with God's help, can do so. Nebuchadnezzar's dream was of a great statue with a head of gold, chest of silver, belly of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of mixed iron and clay. A stone cut without hands smashes the statue and becomes a great mountain. Daniel interprets this as representing successive kingdoms, with the stone representing God's eternal kingdom that will eventually replace all human kingdoms. This apocalyptic dream interpretation, mixing the political with the cosmic, shows how Jewish dream theology evolved during the exile and the centuries that followed. Dreams became not just personal guidance, but visions of history's ultimate meaning and direction. But the Hebrew Bible also warns against false dreams. In the book of Deuteronomy, God warns that false prophets may arise who claim to have dreams from God. If their prophecies don't come true, or if they use dreams to lead people away from God, they are not to be trusted. This introduces the same uncertainty we saw in Greek thought. How do we distinguish true dreams from false ones? The biblical answer is different from the Greek answer, though. The Greeks said true dreams come through the gate of horn, but they offered no certain way to identify which gate any particular dream came from. The biblical answer is that true dreams align with God's covenant and commandments. A dream that contradicts what is known about God's character and must be false, regardless of how vivid or convincing it seems. With the emergence of Christianity, dreams take on new significance. The New Testament is filled with dreams that guide the narrative at crucial moments. The Gospel of Matthew describes how Joseph, Mary's betrothed, learns of Mary's miraculous pregnancy through a dream in which an angel appears and explains that the child is conceived by the Holy Spirit. Later, another dream warns Joseph to flee to Egypt with Mary and the infant Jesus to escape King Herod's massacre of infants. A third dream tells him when it's safe to return. The wise men who visit the infant Jesus are warned in a dream not to report back to Herod as he requested. Pilate's wife has a disturbing dream about Jesus and warns her husband to have nothing to do with that righteous man, though Pilate ignores this warning. These dreams are presented as absolutely trustworthy, direct communications from God guiding the events of salvation history. They require no interpretation. Angels speak plainly. Instructions are clear. This reflects a theological understanding of dreams as one way God's providence works in the world, orchestrating events toward redemptive purposes. But as Christianity developed in its first centuries, attitudes toward dreams became more complex. Early Christians lived in the Greco-Roman world, surrounded by pagan dream interpretation, healing temples, and oracle dreams. Church fathers had to grapple with how to understand dreams within Christian theology. Some, like Tertullian, writing around 200 CE, defended the reality of prophetic dreams. He argued that since the soul is spiritual, it has natural affinity with the spiritual realm and can receive visions during sleep when the body's senses are quieted. God, he believed, sometimes sends dreams, but so do demons, and discernment is necessary. Others, like Jerome, who translated the Bible into Latin, were more skeptical of most dreams. He acknowledged that God had used dreams in biblical times, but suggested that in the Christian era, with the revelation of Christ complete, dreams were less important. Christians should focus on Scripture and prayer rather than seeking divine guidance through dreams. Augustine, perhaps the most influential early Christian theologian, had a nuanced view. In his Confessions, he describes several significant dreams, including one that contributed to his conversion to Christianity. But he also warns against placing too much faith in dreams, noting that they can be influenced by bodily conditions, emotions, and even by demons. Augustine makes a crucial distinction that would influence Christian thinking about dreams for centuries. Dreams cannot add to revelation. God's revelation is complete in Christ and in Scripture. Dreams might guide individual believers in personal matters or confirm truths already revealed, but they cannot introduce new doctrines or contradict established teaching. This created a tension in Christian dream theology that persists to this day. On one hand, the Bible clearly shows God speaking through dreams. On the other hand, dreams are unreliable, potentially deceptive, and can lead people astray. How do you honor the biblical tradition of prophetic dreams while guarding against false claims of divine revelation through dreams? As you drift deeper into rest now, consider how this question reflects the universal human challenge with dreams. They feel meaningful, even profound, but they're also strange, inconsistent, often nonsensical. We want to trust them to find meaning in them, but we're also aware that they might just be mental noise, random neurons firing. The early Christians navigated this by emphasizing discernment through community. A dream should not be trusted merely because the dreamer believes it's from God. It should be tested against Scripture, against church teaching, and should be confirmed by spiritual leaders. This communal approach to dreams contrasts with the more individualistic approach of pagan dream incubation, where a person sought and trusted their own private revelation. This communal approach would continue to shape how dreams were understood in the Christian Middle Ages, which we must now enter as we follow the thread of dream belief through the centuries toward the modern world. Part 6. Medieval Dreams and the Vision of the Divine. Let your breathing become even slower now, even deeper, as we enter the medieval world, that thousand-year period from roughly 500 to 1500 CE, when Christianity dominated European thought, and when dreams took on new meanings within a comprehensive Christian cosmos. Picture a monastery in England around 1100 CE. The stone walls are thick and cold, even in summer. In his cell, a monk named Eadmer has just awakened from a vivid dream. He sits up on his narrow bed, wraps a blanket around his shoulders, and begins to write by candlelight, recording every detail of the dream while it's still fresh in his memory. Eadmer is a chronicler, a keeper of records, and he has made it his practice to write down significant dreams, his own and those of others. He believes dreams are important, that God sometimes uses them to communicate, to warn, to guide. But he's also aware from his theological training that dreams can be deceptive, that Satan can appear as an angel of light even in sleep. Medieval Christian theology developed elaborate classifications of dreams, attempting to distinguish between types and sources. Building on earlier Christian thinkers and on classical philosophy, medieval scholars identified several categories. First, there were somnium naturale, natural dreams caused by physical conditions. If you ate too much before bed, or if you were sick, or if you had strong emotions during the day, these factors might cause dreams that had no spiritual significance. These were the empty dreams that came through the gate of ivory in Homer's classification. Second, there were somnium animale, dreams caused by the soul's own workings, by memory, imagination, and desire processing the events and concerns of waking life. These dreams revealed the inner state of the dreamer, but weren't messages from outside sources. Third, there were somnium celeste, heavenly dreams sent by God or angels. These were true prophetic dreams, visions that conveyed divine will or revealed future events. The dreams in the Bible were of this type. Fourth and most troubling, there were somnium diabolico, demonic dreams sent by Satan and his demons to deceive, frighten, or tempt Christians into sin. These dreams might contain false prophecies to lead believers astray, or they might be nightmares designed to weaken faith through fear. The challenge, of course, was distinguishing between these types. How do you know if a dream is from God or from Satan? Medieval theologians spent enormous intellectual energy on this question. They developed several criteria. A dream from God would align with Scripture and church teaching, would inspire virtue and love, would bring peace rather than confusion. A dream from Satan might contain truths mixed with lies, would inspire pride or lead toward sin, would create obsession or fear. But beyond these general principles, discernment required spiritual maturity and wisdom. This is why medieval Christians were encouraged to discuss significant dreams with their confessor or spiritual director, rather than interpreting them alone. One of the most influential dream texts of the Middle Ages was written by a monk named Gregory of Tours in the 6th century. He collected stories of dreams and visions experienced by saints and martyrs, creating a catalog of authenticated divine dreams. These stories served as models, showing Christians what genuine prophetic dreams looked like. In Gregory's accounts, the Virgin Mary appears to a dying man and heals him. Saints appear in dreams to reveal where their relics are hidden or to request that churches be built in their honor. Angels deliver messages about church controversies or warn of impending invasions. These dreams are presented as simple, clear, and producing verifiable results. The man is healed. The relics are found where the dream indicated. the prophesied events occur. This concreteness was meant to validate the dreams as genuinely divine, rather than products of imagination. As you rest now, sinking deeper into your own approaching sleep, imagine how such stories shaped medieval dream life. Christians went to bed hopping for such visions, praying for divine dreams while also fearing demonic nightmares. Sleep was spiritually loaded, an 8-hour period of vulnerability and potential revelation. The medieval period also saw the continued practice of dream incubation, though now in Christian form. Rather than sleeping in pagan temples, Christians would sleep in churches or at the tombs of saints, hopping for healing dreams or guidance. The cult of the saints, one of the most important aspects of medieval Christianity, was intimately connected with dreams. Saints were believed to be powerful intercessors in heaven, able to work miracles on behalf of those who asked for their help. And one of the primary ways saints communicated with believers was through dreams. If you were sick, you might make a pilgrimage to the shrine of a saint known for healing. You would pray at the tomb, perhaps spend the night sleeping in the church, and hope that the saint would appear in your dream and grant healing. Thousands of miracle stories survive from the Middle Ages, many involving such healing dreams. The process was similar to ancient incubation, purification through confession and prayer, offerings in the form of candles or alms to the church, and then sleep in a sacred space. The difference was that instead of appealing to pagan gods like Asclepius, Christians appealed to Christ and the saints. But medieval Christianity also developed a tradition of symbolic dream interpretation that drew heavily on classical sources, particularly Artemidorus, whose work was preserved and studied throughout the Middle Ages despite his pagan context. Medieval dream books called somnaries provided symbolic interpretations of common dream images. These circulated widely and were consulted by people of all social classes. Some were sophisticated, acknowledging the need for personal context in interpretation. Others were simple lists. To dream of a crow means bad news. To dream of an eagle means high honor. To dream of falling means loss of status. The most interesting developments in medieval dream thinking came from mystical theology. The tradition of Christian spirituality focused on direct experience of God. Mystics described their visions and ecstasies in ways that blur the line between dreaming and waking. Consider Hildegard of Bingen, a German abbess who lived in the 12th century. Hildegard experienced vivid visions throughout her life, visions that she claimed came to her while she was fully awake and aware. She described seeing images of cosmic significance, elaborate allegories involving towers and armies and divine figures, all conveying theological truths. Were these actually waking visions, or were they dreamlike states, perhaps even what we might call lucid dreams? Hildegard insists she was awake, but the phenomenology she describes has much in common with intense dreaming. The images arise unbidden, they're highly symbolic, they convey meaning non-verbally, they're experienced as coming from beyond the self. The same ambiguity appears in the visions of other medieval mystics. Julian of Norwich, an English anchoress of the 14th century, experienced elaborate visions of Christ's passion while sick and near death. She later wrote about these showings, analyzing their meaning, and her account became one of the most important mystical texts in English literature. Were Julian's visions dreams, or hallucinations caused by her illness or some other type of altered consciousness? To ask this question in modern terms is to miss the point. For Julian and her contemporaries, the distinction didn't matter. What mattered was the content of the vision, the truth it conveyed, the way it drew the soul closer to God. Medieval mystics developed sophisticated techniques for discerning true visions from false ones. They emphasized humility, the test of orthodox doctrine, and the guidance of spiritual directors. They warned against seeking visions for their own sake, noting that spiritual pride was one of Satan's favorite traps for those on the mystical path. But they also treasured authentic visions as gifts of grace, as moments when the boundary between heaven and earth became permeable, when divine love broke through into human consciousness in ways that transformed the soul. Let your mind drift now and feel how medieval Christianity created a cosmos in which dreams and visions had a defined place. The universe was enchanted, full of spiritual presences both benevolent and malevolent. Sleep was a journey into this spiritual realm, and the dream images that arose were not merely psychological but had ontological reality. They were things happening, encounters occurring in a dimension that interpenetrated the physical world. This worldview would begin to crack with the Renaissance and the Reformation, as we'll see shortly. But before we move into that new era, we should pause to acknowledge what was lost when the modern world disenchanted dreams, when we reduced them to purely internal psychological phenomena. Medieval people lived in a world that was more frightening in many ways than ours, but also more meaningful. Every event had significance. Every dream might contain a message. Every moment of existence was embedded in a cosmic drama of salvation and damnation. There was terror in this, but also comfort. You were never truly alone, never merely the product of blind material forces. The universe was conscious, and it spoke to you, and dreams were one of its primary languages. As you sink deeper now toward your own sleep, you might feel a small echo of that medieval consciousness. In the moments between waking and sleeping, in those hypnagogic images that flicker at the edge of awareness, perhaps there is still a gateway, a thin place where the boundaries of self become permeable. Medieval mystics knew these places well. They mapped them carefully in their writings, leaving us guides to territories we've largely forgotten. But we must move forward now, into a new age that would bring both enlightenment and disenchantment, that would apply reason to dreams, and in the process transform how the Western world understood these nightly visitors. Part 7. Renaissance and Reformation, Dreams Under Scrutiny. Let your breathing remain slow and steady as we enter the period from roughly 1400 to 1700, when European civilization underwent profound transformations. The Renaissance brought renewed interest in classical learning, scientific observation, and human potential. The Reformation fractured Christian unity and emphasized personal interpretation of Scripture, and both movements, in different ways, affected how people understood dreams. Picture Florence in 1490, a city bursting with artistic and intellectual energy. In a wealthy merchant's palazzo, a small group has gathered to discuss a manuscript of Aristotle's on dreams, recently translated from Greek. These humanist scholars, rediscovering classical texts that had been lost or ignored during the Middle Ages, are excited by Aristotle's naturalistic approach to dreams. One scholar argues that Aristotle was right, that dreams are purely natural phenomena with no divine or demonic source. Another counters that, while Aristotle's observations about how sense impressions linger in the mind are valid, this doesn't exclude the possibility that God might also use dreams as a vehicle for revelation. A third suggests that perhaps ancient pagan dreams were natural, but biblical dreams were genuinely divine, and we need not assume modern dreams have the same character as biblical ones. This conversation represents the new questioning spirit of the Renaissance. Ancient authorities could be challenged, alternative explanations could be proposed, empirical observation could be brought to bear on questions that had previously been resolved by reference to religious doctrine. At the same time, the Protestant Reformation was changing how Christians thought about religious authority. Martin Luther, posting his 95 Theses in 1517, emphasized Scripture alone as the source of doctrine and personal faith as the heart of Christianity. This had implications for dreams. Luther himself experienced powerful dreams that he interpreted as spiritual battles with Satan. He famously described throwing an inkwell at the devil in his room at the Wartburg Castle, though this might have been a dream or a waking hallucination. Luther believed that Satan was real and active, and that spiritual warfare occurred both in dreams and in waking life. but Luther was suspicious of people who claimed special revelation through dreams or visions. The radical reformers, the Anabaptists, and others who claimed direct divine guidance through the Holy Spirit often reported prophetic dreams and visions. Luther saw this as dangerous enthusiasm, a turning away from the sufficiency of Scripture toward subjective experience that could justify any belief or action. The Protestant emphasis on Scripture as the sole authority gradually led to skepticism about modern prophetic dreams. If revelation is complete in the Bible, why would God need to send new revelations through dreams? Might not such claims be either delusional or, worse, demonic deceptions? This skepticism toward prophetic dreams was reinforced by the traumatic experience of the European wars of religion. Radical religious movements, many claiming divine visions and revelations, led armed uprisings. The Munster Rebellion of 1530–41535, in which Anabaptists took over a German city and established a theocracy based on their leaders' visions and prophecies, ended in horrific violence and siege. Events like these made both Protestant and Catholic authorities wary of anyone claiming divine dreams. As you relax more deeply now, consider how doubt about dreams reflects doubt about the permeability of the boundary between natural and supernatural. The late medieval world had been enchanted, filled with spiritual forces constantly impinging on the material realm. The early modern world was beginning to disenchant, to push the supernatural to the margins, to explain more and more phenomena through natural causes. This disenchantment proceeded unevenly and was never complete, but its effects on dream belief were significant. Educated people in the 1600s were more likely than their medieval predecessors to attribute most dreams to natural causes: digestion, humoral imbalance, emotional disturbance, even if they still allowed that God might occasionally send a significant dream. The scientific revolution accelerated this process. As Descartes, Newton, and other natural philosophers developed mechanical explanations for physical phenomena, the same approach was applied to the mind. Maybe dreams weren't messages from outside, but productions of the sleeping brain following natural laws. René Descartes, writing in the 1640s, used dreams as a philosophical problem. In his Meditations, he notes that when we're dreaming, we often believe we're awake and experiencing real things. Only upon waking do we realize we were dreaming. This raises an epistemological question. How can we be certain we're awake now? Might all experience be a kind of dream? Descartes resolves this through his famous cogito argument. Even if everything else is uncertain, the fact that I think proves that I exist. But his use of dreams as an example of potential total deception reveals how dreams were becoming philosophically problematic. Rather than being windows to divine truth, they were examples of how our experience can be completely false. Yet popular belief in prophetic dreams remained strong throughout the early modern period, even as elite opinion became more skeptical. Dream books continued to circulate widely. People still sought healing dreams at pilgrimage sites, and ordinary people continued to interpret their dreams as meaningful, as guidance for daily life, as messages from God or the spirits of dead loved ones. The gap between elite skepticism and popular belief created a social tension. Educated people might smile at the superstitions of peasants who took dreams seriously, while those peasants might view educated skeptics as impious, as having lost touch with spiritual reality. Some figures bridged this gap. Thomas Nash, an English writer of the late 1500s, wrote a treatise called The Terrors of the Night that analyzes dreams in both natural and spiritual terms. He attributes most dreams to physical causes like indigestion or to psychological causes like guilt and fear. But he doesn't rule out demonic dreams, and he provides advice for protecting oneself from nightmares through prayer and proper living. Nash represents the transitional thinking of his era, mostly naturalistic, but not entirely willing to abandon supernatural explanations. Dreams were becoming less divine and more human, but the process was gradual and incomplete. One fascinating development in the 1600s was the emergence of scientific sleep laboratories, primitive though they were. Robert Hooke, the English scientist, observed sleepers and tried to correlate their eye movements and breathing patterns with reported dreams upon waking. This was one of the first attempts to study dreaming empirically, to treat it as a natural phenomenon that could be investigated through observation and experimentation. But the real transformation in how dreams were understood would not come until the 19th and 20th centuries, with the rise of psychology and neuroscience. And before we reach that final chapter of our journey, we should visit one more culture whose dream beliefs developed independently from the Western tradition we've been following. Let your breathing remain steady as we make this final journey before returning to the modern world. Part 8. Indigenous and Eastern Traditions. Though our focus has been primarily on the Western tradition, from Mesopotamia through Greece and Rome to medieval and early modern Europe, we should acknowledge that human beings everywhere have believed in the significance of dreams, and different cultures have developed different ways of understanding them. Imagine a longhouse in the forests of what would later be called New York, around 1500 CE. The Iroquois people living here have developed one of the most sophisticated dream cultures known to anthropology. For the Iroquois, dreams are not merely prophetic, they're expressions of the soul's desires, and if these desires are not acknowledged and fulfilled, the soul becomes sick. The Iroquois practice ritual dream telling. In the winter months, they hold festivals where people share their dreams with the community. These dreams are taken very seriously. If someone dreams that they need a particular object, the community will try to provide it. If someone dreams of conflict or danger, rituals are performed to avert the threat. But the Iroquois also understand that dreams often speak symbolically. If you dream that your house is burning, you might not literally need your house to burn. Instead, the dream might mean you need transformation, renewal, a clearing away of the old. Dream interpretation in Iroquois culture requires wisdom and sensitivity to symbolic language. The Iroquois also believe that some dreams are visits from the dead or from spirit beings. These dreams carry special weight and may require particular rituals to honor the visitors and receive their messages. The boundary between the living and the dead is permeable, and dreams are one of the primary ways the dead communicate with and influence the living. In Australian Aboriginal cultures, dreams are connected to the dream time, the sacred era of creation when ancestral beings shaped the world. But the dream time is not merely past. It's an eternal dimension that continues to exist alongside ordinary time. Dreams are moments when individuals touch the dream time, when they encounter the ancestral powers that underlie everyday reality. For Aboriginal peoples, the landscape itself is dreaming. Every mountain, river, and rock formation has a dreamtime story, and these stories are not myths in the sense of false tales, but accounts of real spiritual events that shape the world and continue to resonate. To walk the land is to walk through dreams made solid. In this worldview, dreams are not personal psychological events, but encounters with a collective spiritual reality. Your dreams connect you to your ancestors, to your land, to the sacred stories that give meaning to existence. Dream knowledge is passed down through generations and is essential for maintaining proper relationship with the spiritual dimensions of reality. Turn your attention now eastward to India, where Hindu and Buddhist traditions have developed elaborate philosophies of dreams and consciousness. In these traditions, the question of whether dreams come from gods becomes more complex, because the nature of ultimate reality itself is understood differently. In Vedantic Hinduism, the great sage Shankara taught that all ordinary experience is Maya, illusion, and that only Brahman, ultimate reality, truly exists. In this view, waking life is not fundamentally different from dreaming. Both are appearances within consciousness, veils that obscure the eternal self, the Atman. Shankara uses dreams as a philosophical tool. When you dream, you create an entire world of experience, complete with people, places, and events. This dream world seems real while you're in it, but when you wake, you recognize it was an illusion, a creation of your own mind. Similarly, Shankara argues, the waking world is a dream of consciousness, no more ultimately real than your nightly dreams. The only true awakening is spiritual awakening, the recognition of your identity with Brahman, the shedding of all illusion. This doesn't mean dreams are meaningless in Hindu thought. The Upanishads, ancient Hindu scriptures, describe 4 states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, deep dreamless sleep, and turiya, a 4th state of pure awareness beyond the other 3. Dreaming is understood as one level of reality, valuable for self-understanding even if not ultimately real. In Buddhism, dreams are also used as metaphors for the nature of reality. The Buddha taught that all phenomena are impermanent, without fixed essence, and that clinging to them causes suffering. Dreams illustrate this perfectly. They arise, they seem real, they dissolve. And just as you don't need to cling to dream experiences, you also need not cling to waking experiences. But Buddhism also developed practices of dream yoga, techniques for maintaining awareness during sleep and dreams. Advanced practitioners could become lucid in their dreams, recognizing they were dreaming without waking up. In this lucid state, they could work with the dream content, transforming negative dreams into positive ones, practicing compassion even in the dream world, or using the malleable nature of dreams to gain insight into the malleability of all experience. Tibetan Buddhism especially developed dream yoga as a spiritual practice. The idea is that if you can maintain awareness during dreams, you're better prepared for the ultimate transition, death, which is seen as similar to falling asleep. If you can navigate the dream bardo, the intermediate state of dreaming, you'll be better equipped to navigate the after-death bardo. In Chinese culture, influenced by Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, dreams are understood in characteristically Chinese terms, emphasizing balance and harmony. Dreams might be caused by physical imbalances in the body, by emotional disturbances, or by spiritual factors. Treating dreams requires restoring balance through diet, herbs, meditation, or ritual. The famous Taoist text called the Zhuangzi contains the story of the butterfly dream. Zhuangzi dreams he's a butterfly, fluttering about happily. When he wakes, he's confused. Was he Zhuangzi dreaming he was a butterfly, or is he now a butterfly dreaming he's Zhuangzi? The story illustrates the Taoist teaching about the relativity of perspectives and the difficulty of distinguishing illusion from reality. In Islamic culture, dreams hold an important place. The Prophet Muhammad received revelations in dream visions, and the tradition of prophetic dreams continued in Islamic thought. But Islamic scholars also developed sophisticated systems for distinguishing between different types of dreams. True dreams, ruya, come from God and are experienced by righteous people. These dreams are clear, memorable, and come true. Ordinary dreams, hulm, are confused, mixed-up images caused by daily life and having no special meaning. And demonic dreams come from Satan, designed to frighten or mislead. Islamic dream interpretation, influenced by both Arab traditions and Greek sources like Artemidorus, became a complex science. Ibn Sirin, a scholar of the 8th century, wrote a dream interpretation manual that remains influential. But he emphasized that dream symbols could mean different things for different people, and that moral character was crucial for receiving true dreams. As you rest now, breathing slowly, reflect on how all these traditions, despite their differences, share common themes. Dreams everywhere are seen as significant, as revealing something important, whether about the future, about spiritual realities, about the self, or about the nature of consciousness itself. Every culture has developed ways to interpret dreams, to distinguish meaningful from meaningless ones, to use dreams for healing and guidance. This universal human concern with dreams suggests something deep about our nature. We are dreaming animals, and we cannot help but wonder what our dreams mean. But in the modern West, a radically new understanding of dreams emerged in the late 19th and 20th centuries, one that would both illuminate and reduce them, that would make them objects of scientific study, while also diminishing their cosmic significance. Part 9. The Modern Turn: Psychology and Neuroscience. Let your mind drift now to Vienna in 1899. A physician named Sigmund Freud publishes a book titled The Interpretation of Dreams. This book will revolutionize how the Western world understands dreams, shifting them decisively from the divine to the psychological realm. Freud's central claim is radical. Dreams are not messages from gods or spirits or even random neural noise, but rather the royal road to the unconscious, disguised expressions of repressed wishes and forbidden desires. Dreams, he argues, are produced by the unconscious mind, which uses symbolic disguise to sneak forbidden content past the censor of consciousness. Picture Freud in his study analyzing a patient's dream. The patient, a young woman, reports dreaming of walking through a house, climbing stairs, and finding a locked room. Freud listens carefully, then asks questions. What were you thinking about before bed? What associations do you have with houses, with stairs, with locked rooms? Through this process of free association, Freud tries to decode the dream's symbolic meaning. Perhaps the house represents the self. The stairs represent effort or ascent toward consciousness. The locked room represents repressed memories or desires. By analyzing the dream, Freud believes he can access unconscious material that the patient cannot directly remember or acknowledge. Freud's approach is both brilliant and problematic. Brilliant because it takes dreams seriously as meaningful phenomena that reveal psychological truth, treating them as puzzles to be solved through interpretation. Problematic because Freud often seems to find sexual symbolism everywhere, reducing the rich complexity of dreams to a relatively narrow set of unconscious wishes, usually sexual or aggressive. But Freud's impact was enormous. He made dreams a legitimate subject of scientific inquiry. He developed systematic methods for analyzing them, and he created a psychological framework that could explain dreams without reference to anything supernatural. After Freud, dream interpretation moved from priests and prophets to psychotherapists and psychoanalysts. The question was no longer, what is God telling me? But what am I telling myself? Dreams became windows into personal psychology rather than messages from cosmic powers. Carl Jung, Freud's student who later broke with him, developed a different approach to dreams. Jung believed dreams were not merely disguised wishes, but messages from the unconscious, expressed in archetypal symbols that connected individual psychology to universal human patterns. For Jung, dreams used a symbolic language similar to myth and fairy tale. When you dream of a wise old man, you're encountering the archetype of the sage. When you dream of a dangerous woman, you're meeting the shadow feminine. These figures aren't just personal but tap into patterns embedded in what Jung called the collective unconscious, a shared psychological inheritance of all humanity. Jung's approach allowed dreams to regain some of their numinous quality while remaining psychological. Dreams didn't come from literal gods, but they did connect us to something transpersonal, to depths of psyche that transcended individual ego. In this way, Jung partially re-enchanted dreams while keeping them within a naturalistic framework. As the 20th century progressed, neuroscience began to study sleep and dreaming with increasingly sophisticated tools. In 1953, researchers discovered REM, rapid eye movement sleep, a distinct sleep stage characterized by brain activity similar to waking, and found that most vivid dreams occurred during REM periods. This discovery revolutionized dream science. Dreaming could now be studied objectively by observing REM sleep and waking people during REM periods to collect dream reports. Patterns emerged. People typically have 4 to 6 REM periods per night, each lasting progressively longer. Dreams become more elaborate and bizarre as the night progresses. Everyone dreams every night, even people who claim they don't. They simply don't remember their dreams. Further research revealed that the brainstem initiates REM sleep, that specific neurotransmitter systems regulate the REM state, that the frontal cortex shows reduced activity during REM, perhaps explaining why dreams lack logical coherence and critical judgment, and that the limbic system, involved in emotion and memory, shows high activity, perhaps explaining why dreams are emotionally intense and draw on memories. As you breathe slowly now, sinking deeper toward your own sleep, consider what this scientific understanding means. Dreams are revealed as biological phenomena, products of complex brain activity during specific sleep stages. The enchantment seems to drain away. Dreams come not from gods but from neurons, not from spiritual realms but from neurochemical processes. Yet something paradoxical emerges from this scientific study. Even as we understand more about the mechanism of dreaming, the subjective experience remains mysterious. We can map which brain areas are active, but we still don't fully understand why those neural patterns produce the specific imagery and narrative of any particular dream. Contemporary neuroscience has proposed various theories about dream function. One influential theory suggests dreams are how the brain processes and consolidates memories, integrating new information with existing knowledge structures. Another proposes that dreams are simulations, practice scenarios where the brain models possible threats and opportunities. A third suggests dreams are essentially meaningless, mere random neural firing that the brain tries to make sense of by constructing narratives. None of these theories has completely triumphed, and dream scientists continue to debate the function and meaning of dreams. What seems clear is that dreaming is essential for healthy brain function. People deprived of REM sleep show cognitive impairment, emotional instability, and eventually hallucinations. We need to dream, even if we're still not certain why. But here's what's remarkable. Despite all this scientific understanding, people still experience dreams as meaningful. We still wake from certain dreams with a sense of significance, with the feeling that something important has been revealed. We still tell our dreams to friends and partners. We still wonder what they mean. The persistence of this sense of meaning, despite naturalistic explanations, suggests something important. Maybe the question of whether dreams come from gods is less important than the question of whether dreams are meaningful. And meaning is not the same as mechanism. Consider an analogy. Music is produced by vibrations of air molecules hitting our eardrums and being processed by our auditory system. This is a complete mechanical explanation of how we hear music, but it doesn't explain why music moves us, why it can bring us to tears or joy, why it feels meaningful. The mechanism and the meaning operate at different levels. Similarly, dreams may be produced by neural activity during REM sleep. This is their mechanism. But the meaning of dreams, their significance for our inner lives, is a different question. A dream might reveal an unconscious fear or desire, might help us process grief or trauma, might inspire creative insight. And all of this can be true regardless of whether the dream comes from the gods. Modern people still practice dream incubation, though they don't call it that and don't usually think of it in religious terms. Artists and writers have long used pre-sleep suggestion to inspire creative dreams. Musicians report hearing melodies in dreams. Scientists have famously solved problems in dreams. The structure of the benzene molecule, for example, was supposedly revealed to the chemist Kekulé in a dream of a snake biting its tail. Some contemporary approaches attempt to bridge ancient wisdom and modern science. Lucid dreaming, becoming conscious during dreams, is now studied scientifically, with researchers mapping the neural correlates of lucid awareness. But lucid dreaming is also practiced within spiritual contexts, continuing ancient traditions of dream yoga. Similarly, modern dream therapy draws on both Jungian psychology and indigenous practices, using dreams for healing while understanding them through contemporary psychological frameworks. Therapists might ask clients to dialogue with dream figures, much as ancient incubation priests helped people understand their temple dreams. But now the framework is therapeutic rather than religious. As you drift closer to sleep now, you might wonder, what's been lost and what's been gained in this modern transformation of dream understanding? We've lost the cosmological context that made every dream potentially sacred, potentially a message from beyond. We've lost the sense of sleep as a dangerous and profound journey into spiritual realms. We've lost the communal frameworks, the temple incubations, the shared symbolic languages, the priestly interpreters that gave dreams social as well as personal meaning. But we've gained understanding of the mechanism of dreaming, insight into the psychological depths that dreams reveal, and freedom from the fear that demons prowl our sleep. We've gained methods for using dreams therapeutically, for mining them for creative inspiration, for understanding ourselves more deeply through their symbolic language. Perhaps most importantly, we've gained the freedom to choose what framework makes sense for our own dream lives. We're not required to interpret dreams as divine messages, but neither are we required to dismiss them as meaningless. We can draw on ancient wisdom and modern psychology, on scientific understanding and personal intuition, creating our own relationship with these nightly visitors, closing the eternal mystery. And so we come to the end of our long journey through human dream beliefs, from the clay tablets of ancient Sumer to the brain scanners of modern neuroscience. We've traveled through thousands of years and across many cultures, following the thread of how humans have understood these mysterious experiences that visit us each night. Let yourself settle now into complete relaxation, your breathing slow and steady, your body heavy and comfortable. As you drift toward your own sleep, your own dreams, what remains with you from this journey? Perhaps it's the recognition that humans everywhere have found dreams meaningful, have struggled to interpret them, have been awed and frightened and inspired by them. This universal concern with dreams suggests something fundamental about our nature. We are creatures who dream, who wonder, who seek meaning in the images that arise when we close our eyes. Perhaps it's an appreciation for the sophistication with which ancient peoples approached dreams, how they developed elaborate systems of interpretation, how they distinguished between types of dreams, how they used dreams for healing and guidance. They weren't primitive or superstitious in the pejorative sense. They were doing the best they could with the understanding available to them, grappling with genuine mystery using the tools of their time. Perhaps it's a sense of loss for the enchanted worldview that made dreams cosmic, that embedded them in a universe of meaning, that saw sleep as sacred time. Modern disenchantment has brought clarity and control, but also a certain flatness, a reduction of mystery. Or perhaps it's gratitude for modern understanding, for the knowledge that dreams are natural phenomena, that nightmares don't require exorcism, that we can study and work with dreams without needing to believe in supernatural intervention. Most likely, what remains is a mixture of all these things, a complex sense that dreams are both more and less than any single tradition has claimed. They are products of our brains, yes, but they're also windows into our depths, expressions of our fears and longings, spaces where creativity and insight arise, experiences that feel meaningful even when we can't fully articulate why. Did dreams come from the gods? For thousands of years, the answer was clearly yes. Gods, spirits, ancestors, demons, all spoke through dreams, shaping human destiny through these nightly visions. This belief was not foolish. It was a way of honoring the mystery of dreams, of acknowledging that they bring us knowledge we don't consciously possess, that they connect us to something beyond our waking selves. In our modern age, the answer is equally clearly no. Dreams come from our brains, from neural activity during sleep, from the complex interplay of memory, emotion, and random neural firing. This understanding is not reductive. It's a way of honoring the complexity of consciousness, of acknowledging that our minds contain depths we barely understand, that within us are processes that can surprise, enlighten, and transform us? Both answers are true in different ways. The ancient priest and the modern neuroscientist are looking at the same phenomenon from different angles, asking different questions, using different tools. Neither invalidates the other. Dreams remain mysterious, remain significant, remain worthy of attention and reflection. As you drift now into sleep, as the boundary between waking and dreaming becomes permeable, as the first dream images begin to form at the edge of awareness, you carry with you thousands of years of human wondering about this experience. You're not alone in this journey. You're part of an endless stream of dreamers stretching back to the first humans who closed their eyes and saw visions, who woke and wondered what those visions meant. Whether your dreams tonight are products of neurons or messages from beyond, whether they're random or meaningful, whether they predict the future or simply process the past, they are yours. They are part of your consciousness, part of your experience of being human. Rest now, dream well, and when you wake, perhaps you'll carry with you a sense of the sacred, ordinary mystery of dreams, neither wholly divine nor wholly mundane, but something in between, something uniquely human, something that has fascinated our kind since the beginning and will continue to fascinate us as long as we close our eyes and enter that other world of sleep. The gods spoke through dreams, the ancients believed, and perhaps they were right, if by gods we mean the deep sources of wisdom and creativity within us, the aspects of consciousness that transcend ego, the voices of intuition and integration that speak in the symbolic language of images rather than words. Or perhaps dreams are simply what brains do when processing experience during sleep. And perhaps that's its own kind of sacred, its own kind of gift, this nightly renewal, this strange theater of the mind where we encounter ourselves in forms both familiar and strange. Sleep now. The question remains open. The mystery continues, and in the morning you'll wake to tell yourself your dreams, to wonder what they meant, to be human in this ancient and timeless way. Rest well, dream deep, let go.